This is the Nerdpreneur podcast where we talk with people making money with their nerdy passions. In this interview, we spoke with professional sports bettor and all-around master of memory recall, Justin Macmahan, founder and owner of Really Good Picks. And it's exactly as it sounds. He has made a career off of sports betting and his knowledge of the industry in its entirety. And if it doesn't make sense how that exactly works into a full-time career, stay tuned because he's going to explain it all, as well as his top picks for this 2023 NFL season. A quick note before we continue, this is the free and abridged version of the interview. If you would like the full meal deal, head on over to Patreon, link is in the description below, where you can get a backlog of other content as well as Justin's top picks. All of the top picks that he shared in this interview will be available in that version. This one has a couple of them, but you'll get all of them in the Patreon version. All of that being said, there really isn't a whole lot of sports conversations in this interview. I mean, we do talk a little bit about it, but we primarily focused on his business. It's a blog-based business. We also talk about the hiring and firing of employees, part-time and full-time, as well as growing a Twitter following, how to do that, how to manage it, and the importance of it for owning your own social media. We did talk about the sports betting industry as a whole, and how he became a pro in the industry. And like I said, occasionally we do talk about some other silly sports stuff, some top picks kind of things. So as the nuggets kind of pop up and the ones that you really like, go ahead and put them in the comments below. We love to hear what y'all think. It's super interesting.
Welcome to Nerdpreneur, where we have fun conversations with people making money with their nerdy passion. As always, I am joined by my co-host Frank.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. His name is Justin Macmahan. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited to chat with you today. So to kick off this interview, Justin, what is your nerdy passion?
Yeah, my nerdy passion is fantasy sports and sports betting, but it really is like the daily fantasy sports is really like my deepest passion.
Fantasy sports. Well, I don't know if you know, our podcast is called Nerdpreneur, and I believe people can be nerdy about almost anything. But for those people on our listenership that are not really into sports, because I think we got a lot of nerds that maybe don't have as much crossover, Frank being one of them.
That's
Could
true.
you tell us a little bit about what fantasy sports is, even as just a concept for people maybe who don't know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be some things that totally resonate and some things I'm sure we're not on the same wavelength, but I appreciate you guys having me on anyway, because Chris, you know I can geek out on this stuff. So fantasy sports is where you are picking real people on your fantasy lineup, and then depending on how they play in their real life games, you're scoring points. So it allows you to have like a different level of fan engagement. So instead of just watching the games and rooting for your favorite team or maybe your favorite player, you actually are competing against your friends, and in my case, in the case of my customers, they're competing for a lot of money to see who can pick the better players that are going to play the best in those games. So it just adds a whole new level to being a sports fan. If you're digging into the numbers and kind of geeking out on the analytics, it gives you something to do. Since I don't get to manage any pro sports teams, I don't get to make any real life decisions, but it makes you feel like your time spent researching it is actually worth something.
Mm-hmm. So if we were to ground this in, say, football, which is, I would guess, the biggest of the fantasy sports is NFL fantasy football, right? Like, I've done a little bit of fantasy football. I only got into it 3 years ago. I'm about to do my third fantasy draft in a few weeks. So, and maybe actually at the time of this release, maybe like next week. So I found it was a total game changer in terms of actually engaging with the game and caring about it. Basically, you just put a fixed amount in, and over the next 16 weeks, you have all these different players that you're following on different teams, and it tracks all these different stats. And there's some math involved, some things like that, but a lot of these apps just kind of do it for you. And yeah, like the individual players, how well they perform in individual games actually makes a difference to your overall team score that week against other teams. And I mean, you're obviously somebody who's created a whole business around this. Could you give an idea of like just get over what is your actual business around fantasy sports and betting?
Yeah, so the business side is just creating content. So it's a subscription service. I like to say we're basically a glorified blog. We're just writing content about which players we think are going to play well. And, we've got a lot of people that are looking for help with their team. The thing is, there's so much news these days that is constantly breaking about all these teams. There's so many reports coming out of teams where there's some inside source will say that this guy might get more playing time this week, or they're hearing this player might not play, so therefore the backup would get to play more. And it's just really impossible for the average person who lives their life and does other things with their time to keep up with all this and actually make sense of all the news. So that's where you kind of have to join a service like mine and get content if you actually want to be competitive. If you're just playing in a league for $20 with your friends, it's probably not a big deal. If you miss some news, it's oh well. But if you're going to try to play for hundreds of dollars on a Sunday afternoon, you really need to know if that backup running back is going to end up getting a lot of touches, because you're probably going to lose to all the people who did know. So that's where a service like mine comes into play. Is more for the serious players who really want to actually dominate their leagues, or they're playing for more money every week.
Now, Frank, you were in our league 1 year. You were, yes, I feel, the not so serious player at the time.
Yes, exactly. So also, can you, I don't know if we got the name of what your business is. What is it called?
Yeah, so I actually just launched a new company in the space a few weeks ago. After I had started a company, ran it for 8 years, I recently started a new one called reallygoodpicks.com. And I paid $9 for that URL, so I'm pretty stoked. I couldn't believe it was available. Yeah, I was like, is this name so bad that no one is willing to use it? Because I will. I think reallygoodpicks.com is a hilarious name. So yeah, that's what we rolled with.
And picks as in when you pick something off the shelf, not like pictures, right?
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, because they call, and it really works for sports betting, it works for fantasy, all the time, because we're making picks, right? We're saying, Chris, you'll love this. Lamar Jackson is a great pick this year, because all the reports out of the Baltimore training camp says that they're going to increase the pace of their offense, and they're going to throw the ball more, which will both really help Lamar. So all the Ravens receivers will all get a boost. So, Chris, I knew you'd love that as a Ravens fan. So that's So Lamar Jackson's my big pick this year.
I remember
that doesn't
Chris
change
always,
it doesn't change my strategy at all. Because I was always, I don't care. I picked him every year if I can get him. He's on my team, which I imagine is not the best way to make sports bets, is based on how much you like the player.
To some extent it is, because the whole point is to have a lot of fun and to get it to be more engaging, right? And so if you're going to watch those games anyway, it's way more fun if you're rooting for Lamar Jackson. And if you're already going to be devastated if Lamar Jackson sucks, you might as well just double down and have him on your fantasy team.
Exactly, right?
I will say
every week.
I will say that one time I played with Chris and a crew, Chris was picking people he would pick teams based on if they were birds, as I recall. It was kind of
remember him telling me about this strategy. Yeah.
Yes. I think it's really interesting, because to me, I chose people based on how cool their last names were. And so I was like, okay, well, if Chris is taking this approach, I'll take this approach. And I mean, I didn't place. I won't go into my story right now, but what's interesting that I want to bring up is just, like you said, it's having that fun. And I think there's a way for anyone to get involved, whether they're as hardcore and nerdy as someone who wants to get those insider tips, or someone that's just like, I want to play and be social and have fun, but I like certain colors. So any team that has green in their color, I'm going to pick them.
And it's so wild, too, because a lot changes. If you don't play fantasy football, you might go in with all the best stats initially and all the right expectations, and you got all the picks that you thought you should get. And then 2 weeks later, everything has changed because of injuries or because of shifts in a lineup, or just any number of things that can go wildly different. At least in football, that is generally the feeling I got from playing that game. And I wanted to just ground this again in sort of you've heard how we make picks based on birds and colors, okay? That's what it is. But Justin, you run a business around this. I'm guessing that's not how you're making picks. People are paying money for your picks. Can you tell us a little bit okay, how did you get to the point of being a person with the positioning and authority to be running a business where people are paying for your picks?
Yeah, so we did put your bird theory to the test and it ended up not being the most predictive. So we had to dig deeper, find
Good.
some other strategies.
Good.
So yeah, I got into the whole thing when I was in high school, and technically you can't play on these websites until I think you have to be 18, but everybody really signs up in high school in America. It's, like all the age restrictions, you start early.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so I'm playing in high school with one of my friends for like $5, $10. We're building a lineup every Sunday. And it just became a passion of ours to just keep up with news. And then we'd spend all Sunday watching all the games, and it just made it more fun. And so when I went to college, I was there on a scholarship, and I had a stipend for like $1,500 a semester of spending money. And we really didn't need it at all because they covered all of our expenses. So even there were so many events you could go to on campus that were free. So I was like, what am I going to actually spend $1,500 on when they pay for my laptop, my books, like everything, my food? So I decided to put it onto one of these sites called FanDuel, where you can like compete against other people in fantasy sports. And I figured out something pretty early on in baseball that was really working for me. And I just kept growing that amount until I eventually won $100,000 on one contest. And I qualified to go to the live MLB final. And they were hosting it at the Playboy Mansion that year. And it was actually, so they flew me and three of my friends out to LA. And they had to sneak us wristbands to say we were 21 because we were like 19 years old, and we're like, dude, we're not going to this party like a dry party. Come on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're like, all right, we'll get you wristbands. So it was the last party at the mansion before Hugh died, and
Wow.
it was rumored that that was probably going to be the case because he wasn't doing well. So a ton of extra models flew out and voluntarily attended the party, which is cool because usually these parties, as you can imagine, are mostly a sausage fest. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so we actually had a really sick party there. And I came in first place and I won the whole thing, much to the dismay of the FanDuel staff who told me to lay low. Then I had to go up on the stage drunk with my friends and accept the trophy. So it's funny, there's a book written about the industry. And my only mention in the book, they actually spend like 20 minutes talking about that FanDuel Mansion party and that event. And the only mention I got somehow was some kid no one knew won the contest. So that's how I kind of like broke onto the scene. And I started posting my pics on Twitter for free. And I just started accumulating a lot of followers. That wouldn't work today. But like 8 years ago, there weren't a lot of people doing that yet. So I was kind of picking up steam, and people saw me on the leaderboards. They'd see my name. And luckily, I was fortunate to have made my username just exactly my name, Justin Macmahan, which is also my Twitter handle. So it made it easy for people to see me win a contest and then look me up and then find me on Twitter. Most people's usernames are something like 2 girls, 1 Cooper Cup. Like it's something like really bad that you would not want to be like associated with. On the other main platform, my username for years was the Human Cespedes. There was a baseball player. There's a baseball player named Yoenis Cespedes, and of course the movie. So, because we all made these accounts when we were like 15 years old, right? So everyone has the dumbest usernames, and you're not allowed to change them. But luckily on this site, my name was Justin Macmahan, so I was able to kind of start building up a following that way.
Wow, that's a crazy story, man. I mean, like at 19 to go to the Playboy Mansion, that's like a fantasy of like every teenage boy ever, probably, right?
Right. I was gonna say, no matter what you're a nerd into, you're probably like, that's cool, right? Like I think everybody would like to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, so this was a baseball fantasy contest or tournament, I guess. Was it like global, or was it just the state? I guess.
So you had to qualify for it. You had to be one of like the top 100 fantasy baseball players, and then you win another event to like qualify to get flown out to that event. So they put you up in a hotel, they fly you out, and they take you out to dinners and stuff. It's like the whole they really do it up because they want you to be like really invested in getting there year after year and being one of the top players. So for like the last 6-7 years, I've gone to multiple of these live finals every year. But I kind of just decided with my wife earlier this year that we're probably going to stop going just because it's kind of repetitive, like I've been so many times, it's the same routine. And I'm really glad I went a lot when I was really young because it was so cool when I was 19. And now that I'm getting older and I've been married for a while, it's just like, all right, it's not quite the same, you know? Like the guys want to go clubbing and I'm just like, I don't know. I think me and my wife are going to go to sleep.
Wow. And so, I mean, do you look back on that and say, okay, I was lucky, or did you really like figure something out as like a hack for like where did this kind of story emerge in terms of a skill set for you?
Yeah, so 8 years ago, the strategy was different than it is today. My skill set back then was that I was really identifying some stats that other people weren't valuing enough. And so I was just building my lineups entirely based on those stats, overweighting them intentionally in my projections, knowing that they were being underweighted in other people's. And so my strategy has always kind of been, if I believe in a guy more than everyone else, even if I still don't think he's the best play, I want to use that guy instead of someone that I believe in less than everyone else who still projects a little better. Does that make sense? Like if you have a guy, and most people agree that one guy is going to score 11 points, the other guy is going to score 8. If I have them at 10 and 9, I'll use the guy I have for 9 because I just know how much more unique that's going to be. And that's the big strategy to winning these contests. And so from playing it almost every day for 8 years, that's my real strength now. It's like building the projections has become something that's pretty ubiquitous where everyone is within a point or two of each other. There's actually like just such consensus models now of how much you're supposed to weight all the stats for each sport. So the real skill set is knowing what everyone else is going to do and figuring out how to be unique. And so that's what I help our customers with. I say, hey, I've seen 1,000 slates like this one. Everybody is going to pick the Rockies bats tonight. I think you should go with the Oakland A's instead. So that's kind of where I've seen it all play out. I know how much other people are going to pick each player. And so that's where I think the strongest edge is today, is kind of understanding what other people are going to do.
So, okay. So this is where I get to step in and ask some silly questions or obvious questions.
Yeah.
So it matters. The uniqueness of the pick is important.
It is in daily fantasy, which is like FanDuel and DraftKings, because there might be 10,000
which
people.
are two brands of
Those are two of the
platforms.
big brands. Yeah, so those are the two big brands that people play on. And the way it works is that every player has a price, and you have a salary cap, and you can buy any player you want. So you and I could make the exact same lineup in theory. And so that's why you want to be unique. You don't want to have the same lineup as somebody else because the prizes are very top heavy. It's like 100,000 to first, and by the time you get down to 10th place, it's like 1,000. So you really want to go aggressively for first place. And so if you end up having the same lineup as 50 other people, then you're all just going to chop that top spot. You can't really make that much money. So you want to have a unique lineup. And so if everyone has the same exact opportunity to pick the same players, it actually becomes pretty predictable what most people will probably do. They're just going to use the guys that project the best. So you actually want to use guys that project pretty well, but not quite the best. And so that's where you kind of need to use a site like mine because it's just pretty difficult to nail that on your own.
So then this kind of ties into this other question, which is around scalability of this kind of business model and other influencers that are out there. And I'm sure there's like some big names that people follow and they get their picks that are for free, quote unquote. And so you get a lot of people that follow those influencers. Now, how does that relate to your business? Because, ideally, a business like yours that has a subscription model where people can sign up to get the insider knowledge, if you end up scaling to a point where you have like millions of people paying for your
I don't
service,
think it's that scalable. Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
it can. I don't think it can be scaled that large. That would be awesome. I wish that could work. But yeah, I think that you're kind of capped out at probably like 10,000 users. I think when you exceed that amount, I think it starts to hinder the other users, that it's growing too much, and now you're all doing the same thing in the same contest to an extent where it's hurting you. So that's part of what made me leave my original company. And ultimately I just closed it down. And we had launched that company and spent years pursuing growth. And it was just all about scalability. And we reached the point where we had 30,000 users, and only about 8 to 10,000 of those users had ever purchased anything. The rest of them were consuming free content. And I had been told by people in the industry that what really matters in this industry is revenue and user data. You want top line metrics. And for years, that's been true. That's what Silicon Valley was investing in. And all the big companies that were being sold or purchased in my industry were all really being valued on a multiple of revenue. And so I bought into that. I subscribed to it, even though I thought that does sound kind of crazy to ignore profitability. But that's what everybody's doing. And that's what, we explored selling in 2020. And we only got, a 2.5x revenue offer, which wasn't bad. But I was like, well, hey, we're profitable. Like these other companies are losing money, and you're giving them the same offer as us, who's profitable. And they said, we don't care about that because we're just going to pump so many users in that your current EBITDA doesn't matter. So that was how I was approaching the industry, right? So then I said, all right, well, then we're not going to sell right now. We're going to invest more into getting more top line revenue, even if it comes at the expense of being profitable. And as I'm making that adjustment, the market is making the opposite shift.
Yeah.
Where everyone just goes the other way. So now, fast forward 2 years later, I go back to the table and say, hey, we're ready to sell. And the guy says, well, now we're just only valuing based on EBITDA. So I was like, well, now we're not profitable. He's like, yeah, you're going to have to get back to exactly where I told you to leave, because now we're only doing EBITDA multipliers. And I just kind of took a step back from the whole thing. And as we went through the process of looking to sell, this was early this year in 2023, as I really dug through the numbers, I realized that our tech guys were screwing us. And I had always believed that you should just like silo yourself in the part of the business that you're an expert in and let other people who are experts in other domains take care of that. And that you can't wear all the hats or you'll just burn yourself out. And I don't know if that's terrible advice, but you have to understand things at least enough to know if you're being strung along or kind of misled. And the thing with tech is that it's just really hard to call out somebody. Like, they send over a spreadsheet with billable 300 hours and there's just 100 line items of things they did. And there's no way for me to know if those things actually took 30 seconds or if they took 4 hours, because I don't know what they even are. So what I realized is that I needed to start all over, because the operation had scaled to the point where I couldn't possibly take over the tech on my own. But I knew if I started over, I could launch a very basic website. I think I could serve the customers just as well, which I think I am. And the customers actually are preferring the new, basic, simple platform I built. And my wife and I can just run the whole website ourselves with like the occasional Upwork developer that we paid $30 an hour to help us out a little bit. But yeah, we built the whole site for like less than $1,000.
Damn, you've really leaned it out.
Yeah. We were spending about 10 grand a month on tech at the other company. And I was like, this just can't be right. And when we looked into selling, we were actually the company that actually put an offer on the table and wanted to buy us earlier this year. Not the original one I thought I would sell to, but a different one. They were looking at our books and said, you guys are way overpaying for tech. Like we want to cut your whole tech team and we're just going to use ours. Like we don't want to retain anybody that's been a part of this. And that's what really made me realize, like, okay, obviously mine is messed up. And no one else had ever gotten that inside of a look, because, I would have family and friends look at it, but they say, well, we don't understand the operation well enough. But this other company is like, well, we do the same thing as you and we're paying a third of what you're paying. So obviously you're doing something wrong. And so that's when I realized, okay, I just have to get away from the tech team. And I could go into the whole details of how we did it, but essentially they just weren't willing. I tried to fire them, they wouldn't let me. They were just like, no, these guys, they don't know what they're talking about. They're lying to you. They just kept telling me I was being lied to by the other company. And I was like, well, they have no incentive to lie to me, and you have a lot of incentive to lie to me. So ultimately, the only thing I could really do was just walk away, because it was just like I would have to take them to court to really like facilitate anything to get total control of the company back, because they have access to the code, right? So yeah, I have some access, but do I really know how to take all of it? Not really. So it just became simpler and easier to just start over, and I'm really glad I did.
Damn, you were spilling that tea, dude. All that drama, all
No,
that gossip. That's funny.
Juicy. I was on another podcast like a couple days after I announced my new company. I went on one and they were like, well, how do we know that you're telling the honest side of the story, right? Like, couldn't they? And I said, well, reach out to them for comment, and I guarantee you they will not talk to you. And that is how you know who's being honest, because they are not talking. They haven't said a single word on any social media or anything. Because I think they knew they were just overcharging a young kid who didn't know enough about tech to call them out for it. So they don't want any part of talking about it.
So how did so you ran this company until fairly recently? You just sold or kind of stepped away from that in the last year, is that right?
Yeah, I only stepped away from it about a month and a half ago, about a month ago, and I closed it down and just made an offer on my social media. The nice thing is, email lists are great if you own the whole business. Mm-hmm. If you're a partner, like I was, even as a majority owner, a social media following is way better because I own that, not the company. Mm-hmm. So I could just take my social media following and say, hey guys, my content is now on reallygoodpics.com. And just like that, everybody converts over to the new site. I was able to bring almost all the customers without having to take the email list, without having to take any assets from the original company. I just walked away and said, all right, you guys can have it now because it's worthless anyway. The second I leave, all the content's gone. So it just, the site's just dead now. Yeah, that's where the value of kind of owning your own social media is valuable.
And also having and maintaining your positioning too, because that's something you've consistently, I guess, had in order to be able to do that. Is the people who follow you on, I'm guessing, is it Twitter is your main social media?
Yeah, Twitter is where all like the sports content is hosted.
Yeah. I guess it's X now, right? But but yeah, they basically trust you, know you, and they believe in what you're doing. So the ability to have that relationship direct with your audience, I guess, is super powerful for you to be able to say, oh, I'm doing this new thing, so this is, if you want what I do, this is where it's going to be. That's really really powerful. I feel like we've skipped over so much to get to like the most recent thing that you've done, which is sort of like start up this new thing. But I'm curious because you like won this $100,000 prize thing, and you did was that what made you kickstart going into business, or like how did that idea to say like maybe I should start a business around this emerge?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny how it got started. I was studying abroad in Hong Kong for a summer after my freshman year in college, and I'd been doing really well in fantasy, but I hadn't really thought of starting a business at all. I was reading a book called How Google Works, and I thought it was going to teach me how the Google search engine works, which I was just curious about. And it didn't at all. The book is fantastic, but it's really all about company culture and how to build a team culture that people want to be a part of. So you learn nothing about the algorithm. And so a family friend, I was visiting him in the Philippines because I was already over there. I thought I'll pop over, see him. He saw me reading the book, asked me how I was enjoying it. I said, well, I really want to learn more about the search engine optimization stuff that I was kind of hoping I'd get an insight into. And he said, oh, I have a friend in tech that does SEO. I don't know him all that well, but I can connect you and see if he'd be willing to teach you about it. So I got on a Skype call with the guy who became my tech partner, and he said the best way to do it is to just build a blog. Can you write about anything to make a blog, and I'll just show you how to set up the SEO and optimize it, and that'll really teach you better than anything. And I said, yeah, I could write about fantasy sports. It's the one thing I could write about, right? It's that or being a kid in college, like who cares? So I was like, all right, I'll write about fantasy sports. So I started it just with the intention of learning about how SEO works. And ironically, I never learned how SEO works because, I mean, I did to a very basic level, right? But like the second it got started, I was like, well, I'll start tweeting out these articles and see if anybody's interested. And so people were interested. And then the site started getting visitors so quickly that the guy was like, hey, we should turn this into a real business. I'll just manage the SEO for you so you could focus on making this content because clearly people want it. So let's make this into a business. So I gave him 15% of the company to manage the website, which I now know is incredibly simple to manage a WordPress blog. Like it literally would have taken me like an hour to figure out how to do it myself. But I just had no idea. And he offered to do it. And I thought, oh, this is nice. And I think for a long time, his intentions were good. I think it's just as the money starts coming in more and more, and I kind of feel like a tech person is similar to like a cleaning lady or a cleaning man, where the longer they've worked for you, the lazier they get, but they also expect more pay. Like I feel like I know my grandma has 2 cleaning ladies, because she doesn't have the heart to fire her original one, but she's terrible now. So she literally has a second cleaning lady who comes and actually cleans their house, so she doesn't have to fire this lady she's had for 25 years, because she says she's basically family at this point. I can't get rid of her.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that's
so
how,
true.
yeah. So that's how I feel like it got with this tech guy, where it's just like he stopped putting in any real effort and started demanding more and more money. And but anyway, so that's how it got started. It's just a blog to learn SEO, and then it just turned into a business.
Well, this is such a common situation that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're just getting started in businesses, they don't know what they don't know. And so you make decisions based on what you think is right at the time. But as it goes and goes and goes, usually staff or people who you hire or working with a team becomes these like traps for entrepreneurs in some way, like you were saying. And I can't tell you how many times when I was developing other sales managers and franchises, essentially for my old company, where somebody had like the worst receptionist who was really a recruiting assistant, someone responsible for filling their office with reps, and they just didn't want to fire them. It would be like, oh, but I'll work with them and they'll get better. And then it would be like, they'll hum and haw about it and then debate and avoid the conversation for like 3 or 4 weeks. And meanwhile, their business tanks for the next 3 or 4 weeks. And then finally, when they're at the point of desperation, they're like, okay, fine, I'll find someone new. But then they have to worry about scaling up with that new person and teaching them. And I mean, that's a very valuable lesson to learn, I think, at this moment. And maybe, I would love to hear more about like, how do you think about employees and hiring and like partnerships and stuff now after having gone through that experience? What are some other things?
I'm so anti-permanence now. Like, I don't want business partners to have equity because you just can't get rid of them. And I don't even want to have full-time employees, because I employed a guy for 4.5 years, and working at my company full-time is one of the greatest jobs that you could possibly have. I think this guy probably worked about 15 hours a week, collected a salary that was double what he was making as a teacher, and got to write about fantasy sports all the time, right? And he got to be home. It was a remote job. He got to be home with his family. He told me constantly it was a great job. He loved it. Well, I finally had to lay him off earlier this year because I was going to close the company down. So I was like, you need to go do something else. And he was so mad at me, and like, oh, you're putting my family out on the street. Like, you're taking the food off the table for my kids. And look, he reached out and apologized weeks later. He's like, hey, I get it. Like, tough spot for you, tough spot for everybody. But no one likes to be let go ever. Mm-hmm. And you can think, oh, I did this nice thing for this person, employing them for 4 years. I had a really good job and a good, this is better than most jobs that exist. But most people think of it the opposite way. They think they're giving you their time working for you. Like, they're doing you the favor by being there as an employee. And it's just made me really want to lean into part-time employees. So I have 20 part-time employees at my new company and no full-time employees. I'm the only full-time person there. I would so much rather supplement a role with 2 part-time people than to put in a full-time person that now their livelihood depends on me, and it's so much harder to just get rid of them. If I want to cut the part-time people, I don't feel bad about it. But if I want to cut the full-time people, it's like Chris was saying, you hum and haw over it, and it's like, I don't want to have to do it. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, and they're going to hate me. And I think I feel like firing employees is like breaking up with a girlfriend. Like, if you're even thinking about doing it, you probably should, but you still drag it out longer than you should.
Yeah. Well, it's they always said, like, hire slowly and then fire quickly was one of the things I learned in my business. And
I did it the opposite way.
That's a hard way to learn. And I've often found that when you start bringing people on, you learn very quickly what to look for in, say, a good or potential employee too. And it's not always just their skill set, but more also like the person that they are and how they approach work, or how they how they are in other areas of their life is usually how they are in your job too. And so I'm curious, like, when you were hiring all these people, because you've clearly hired quite a few people over the 8 years, and maybe not fired too many people, but you've definitely hired some people. How do you think about hiring practices for maybe nerdpreneurs who want to start delegating things in their job that they maybe don't want to do?
Yeah, the best shift that we made on the hiring process is we had them fill out a really weird application where we asked questions like, is a hot dog a sandwich? Justify your opinion. And that type of question where there's no right answer, like we'd say, tell us about a player that you think is going to have a good season and why. Like things that they're not at all used to answering in job interviews. I found that to be better because you could actually see into their personality a little bit. And some people will answer these questions in a way that is so combative that you wouldn't believe. Like one of them is like, are aliens real? And you'll get people, I don't give a shit what you say, like you could say they're definitely not or they definitely are. I just want to see how you handle it. And sometimes people will just completely eliminate themselves from getting an interview. And it saves me a lot of time from interviewing people that I get on the call and I'm just right away like, ugh, no. Like, and so I think it's helpful to put some sort of screening that's beyond a normal question that they might just be copy pasting from another interview they already wrote out the answers to. Because people will put some stuff like that's just so out there that not just out there in a way like that's a unique opinion, but out there in a way where you're like, whoa, I don't really think I would trust this person to walk my dog. Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's what you're really looking for, right? Like I've probably had 100 reference calls from people who worked for me and then went on to work somewhere else. Because we do mostly part-time people, I've probably hired 150 people. And most of them have gone on to work at, they get offers. We've had people go to the NBA, work at ESPN. And I always tell people, use this as a launching pad. Like I'm paying very little for part-time work. This is really to build experience in the industry and launch into something else if that's what you want to do. Totally on board with that. So whenever people call me for like a resume check, I almost always, as quickly as I can, just get to what they really want to ask that they legally can't. I just say, yeah, Chris is a normal person. He's a normal guy.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, thank you for telling us that. We really appreciate that. Because you can't ask, but that is all they're wanting to know, right? Like they're calling like, well, tell me about a time. And I'm like, hey, look, Chris is a normal guy. Like he's a great employee. I'll be disappointed to lose him. But he deserves to go. I usually say he deserves to go somewhere better. And that's really all they want to hear is they're just a normal person that's going to not have a big issue at work.
Yeah, they're not going to emotionally break down when you ask them to do something.
Exactly.
To prove that a hot dog is a sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. That's a good example of like what people should look for if they're starting to hire people and they've never done it before. What to look out for. Not only the hot dog sandwich question or one of the things that we have, which is soup a cereal or cereal
right.
soup.
That's on our application.
Oh, yeah?
Well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Yeah. So instead of, not only having those, but just kind of like, okay, what are the kind of things that I should be looking for when hiring someone? And that is, are they a normal person? Because, I mean, I'm tempted to dive into like an example of someone that really was not a quote unquote normal person to work with. And maybe a lesson that came out of that.
Are you asking him to out somebody right now?
You don't have to out anybody, but if there's a good story in there, I would not mind hearing that.
I was never just giving any names, but we had a guy that seemed like he just wasn't really interested in following the protocols that we had already laid out, and he was delivering a pretty good product, but I would definitely not have described him as normal after a week of working with him. This is early on when we hired people pretty easily and kind of would give them a chance, right? Like, all right, let's give them a couple of weeks to see how they do and then decide if we want to keep them or not, which is tough because at that point they're kind of making friends on the team and they have to be pretty bad to actually get rid of them. So it's better to do a tough screening up front. So anyway, this guy was just like, I could sense that he was not interested in learning from other people on the team, which I would describe as an abnormal trait and one that we're not looking for. Like you want people who want to learn from others, even if they're the smartest person in the room, you want them to be trying to learn more from other people. And this guy didn't seem interested in that at all. That was the big thing that I was like, that's the red flag that stands out to me. Well, a month in, another company reached out and said, hey, I'm sure you're not aware of this because I know you and you wouldn't be doing this, but your MMA articles have been just straight up plagiarized from our website for the last 3 weeks. And that's what this guy's role was. And when I confronted him about it, he really wasn't even that apologetic. He was like, they make good content. Our users want good content. Like, I don't see the problem. And I was like, how do you not see the problem? Like, you're plagiarizing someone else's work. So, of course, we fired him. But that's an example where it's just like, Like, I don't feel bad talking about that guy at all because I think that's just clearly wrong. Like, I don't
Yes.
think and that's where the danger is, like, when someone is demonstrating sort of like abnormal emotional qualities, their ethics may be weirdly compromised as well, right? Like, I don't care if someone's like abnormal in the way that they're just like, all I do is play video games. It's like, fine. Like, I don't care. I just want to get the sense that you have like empathy, in a way that's like normal, that you would expect to have another human being. Like, there's a lot of
Emotional
people that,
intelligence, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Just some baseline emotional intelligence. I think when I say normal, what I really mean is just some level of emotional intelligence. You don't have to be super high intellectual quotient, because we can teach you the basics of how to research, how to read these models, how to read the projections, and then how to write the article. And we'll have an editor fix it if you make grammatical errors. The thing that we just can't teach is the emotional intelligence to interact with your colleagues and to talk to the customers a little bit. So yeah, it's hard. Hiring is tough. There's no like silver bullet that's just like, oh, do this and you'll always hire good people. And good people can turn into bad people. So it's not, they get real comfortable in the job and they stop trying as hard as they did when you promoted them or whatever. So it can be tough.
Yeah, that's a great point, though. I appreciate you elaborating on that. It helps me visualize. Now, Justin is laying down some pretty hard facts about hiring and firing from an employer's perspective. And originally, this made me actually pretty uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure to include it or not. But I think it's really important. It's a great reminder that it's time for people like us to secure our side hustles. And I want you to make sure that you're seriously thinking about the tools that you have to help you secure that additional income. I mean, this is something that Chris and I take very seriously. I mean, we want folks like you, dear viewer, to make sure that you are doing the best you can with the tools you have, and then to build on your toolbox of business and sales knowledge and ways to market yourself better, and just to get the word out there about what you're doing, because it's more than likely that what you're doing is super awesome, but people just don't know yet. So head on over to our Patreon. There's a link in the description below. And I know before you go ahead and hit that fast forward button, yeah, it does cost something, but we made it intentional. All of these options that we have right now, just 2, but they're very affordable. And as we continue to add more things that are more tailored to what people are looking for, those will also be affordable. So what can you expect on our Patreon? We've got a backlog of interviews just like this, as well as many Talking Nerdy episodes where conversations range from goals and intention all the way to online dating and, of course, Dungeons and Dragons, because Chris and I are nerds. We're business-focused nerds. That's what this podcast is all about. So let's get back to the interview with Justin.
I'm curious about, I found that in my experience, if you have a mission or something greater than just yourself, that your company or you as an individual is trying to place out there in the market, you can get more people to keep working, or not get lazy, but actually find ways to work harder. And I'm fairly mission driven, so like when I work for a company, I only work for companies that align with their mission, let's put it that way.
Right.
That I believe in what they're doing. And I think that's a good advice for generally most people, so that you actually do keep working and staying productive. But did you have values or a mission that you were promoting to your own people that helped align them to keep working or moving in the right direction?
Yeah, we did, and I think at the new company, I'm actually doing a better job of that than at the original one. Because at the original one, we changed directions so many times that I think maybe the mission adjustment didn't trickle down, like didn't get communicated well enough. Whereas at the new company, there's just 3 clear goals. We want to deliver great content that the users are happy with, and we want to make sure that the users are having fun, and we want to make sure our team is having fun. And I think the third one got lost in the last company because we were so focused on growth. And if we had to choose, we were always putting the customer first, and we were always putting the content quality first. And that made people a little less excited to work for us. And therefore, they really expected to be paid more. And that's where everyone just kind of kept expecting to be paid more and more. And that doesn't fit the culture of a company like this, because it's just it's not scalable enough for everyone to be able to just like make a full salary off of writing fantasy content. It's more of a hobby job. And so at the new company, I've set it up where so far all the employees are telling me this is really fun. Like making this content is a blast. It's so much better than the old format. And the customers are loving the format too. So, and I'm communicating with them every day in our Discord. And our customers are in there talking, asking our opinion on things. And I get to ask them all the time, what do you guys think of this? What do you guys think of the way we're doing this? And so gathering all that feedback and building community is like a really big value that we had at the beginning of the old company. And then when we were told, you guys need to add more users and you need to scale, we lost sight of that value of building community. And instead we thought, okay, well, it's not scalable to build a community group chat with 100,000 people. So we need to basically cut communication with the customer to build a more scalable product. And while it did scale, I think we lost some level of customer loyalty by dropping the community aspect, and it made it less fun for everybody, both the customers and our team. And so it's hard to say I regret doing it because everyone was telling me that's what I needed to do, right? And so we're trying to grow this company to sell it, and that's what the buyers are saying we need to do. So I don't know if I would do it differently. Of course I would do it differently knowing how it goes, but I don't think if I could go back in time, I think I would do it exactly the same way, because you're trying to sell it to this company and that's what they're telling you they want you to do. So it just didn't work out, but I'm glad that we've gotten full circle back to valuing community, valuing having fun, and really not trying to grow it into a huge thing. I'm like, you know what, this is a good business. It'll support my wife and I have fun with it. I mean, what more can you ask for, right?
So I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask, since we have a professional picker on our show, and I am about to pick my fantasy sports team very shortly for football. How do you feel about giving us a couple of your, picks that I should be thinking about?
Yeah,
do you think you can talk about that?
Yeah, definitely.
They need to be bird related teams though.
I will stick. I will abide.
Yeah. If they're mostly birds, I'm okay. I'm okay with a few, I can have a few cats in there too.
One non-bird, and then I'll stick to birds. So
right.
Starting with the Ravens, like I said, I really think they're going to pass a lot more. I like Lamar Jackson a lot. Going over to their ancestral relative, the Falcon, I think that the Falcons are going to run the ball a little too much. I think people are too excited about, they have way too many receiving options, and they have a quarterback that runs and an offense that has really stated their intention is to run a lot. So I'm not getting too excited about the passing there. Now going to the Cardinals, I actually really like Marquise Brown. Write that name down, Chris. Marquise Brown.
Totally.
I think he is a fantastic pick. He was so good last year when they didn't have DeAndre Hopkins and they got rid of him. So I think he could really have a great year. And then my one non-bird pick for you. I'll stick in the animal kingdom and go with the Buffalo Bills. I think Dalton Kincaid. He's a rookie, and typically rookie tight ends don't really get much work. But they're really viewing him more as a receiver. He's not really doing a lot of blocking like a tight end normally would. He's really just running routes as a receiver. And he broke a lot of records in college as a receiving tight end. And I think people are missing the boat by looking at him too much as a tight end, because rookie tight ends historically don't do very well. They should just look at him more as a general pass catcher in a really good offense. And I think if you look at him that way, you could take him in the last round of your drafts, store him on your bench for a few weeks and just see how involved he is. You can drop him if he doesn't look good, but if he's involved, then you'll be really glad you snagged him in the last round.
Nice. That's really cool. I appreciate those picks.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I'll hit you back in 16 weeks and let you know how they went.
Yeah, let the viewers know in the description of this episode. We promise there's not that much football talk. You could just skip through. If you really don't care at all, just when you start hearing the football, just hit the forward 30 seconds until you stop hearing football.
Exactly.
That's what we don't have to do
much
every time. It's we talked about fairy wings in that one episode, but we really hardly talked about fairy wings, and now this is football.
Honestly, I will just do a little quick shout out. That's an awesome episode for businesses, actually. If you haven't listened to it, she's got a lot of good things about it. It's not just about fairy wings.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and, Chris, if you're good on questions, I'm suggesting we transition over to our random rolls.
Let's do it.
93.
Ooh. Okay. Did you ever play with Legos?
I did.
Okay, good. All right. What are what who wrote this?
I did. Okay.
Okay.
Look, I'm just saying. All right, ask the question as is. He'll understand it.
I'm
Trust
gonna
me.
try, but the sentence
No,
structure is okay. What Lego set should be made?
Oh, like one that doesn't exist but should be created.
Totally.
Yes.
I think. Wow, that's a good question, Chris. I don't think
Thank
it's.
you.
I don't
If
think
only
it's
it
bad
was
at all.
written that way.
Sorry, there was an extra word in there. I realized after reading it. But
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I actually think I always thought growing up that they should have Lego guns that you build like Nerf guns, but you build your own Lego gun and then you can fire like foam pellets out of it. I would like to see them build like because I was with my wife has some younger kids in the extended family, and we got them their first Nerf guns. I don't know, they were 7, 8 years old. They recently got their first Nerf guns. They were so excited. And I thought it would have been a cool activity if they could have like built them themselves. Spend a whole day like building your own Lego gun, and then you just feel so proud of it. And then maybe you wouldn't just leave it on the sidewalk outside because you'd really care about it because you built it. So that I think that would be a good one. I don't know if it's feasible or not, but
I like that idea, especially since I mean, that sounds like the most American Lego
Yes.
set you could
Oh,
probably
right,
ever
yeah,
create.
definitely.
I definitely don't think anyone, because I think it's a Danish company from Denmark originally. They're like the least gun owning
Okay, yeah.
country I think in the world.
They're not going to
So
love that.
They may not love that, but you get enough people involved. I bet you it would do really well. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
there
think
is-
the only thing that they're probably more passionate about than being anti-gun is being pro-capitalism and making money. So I think if they were told that it could work and it would sell, I bet they would be on board.
they do have
Buy
a site.
Lego AR-15.
They do have a site where you can actually put up Lego suggestions, and people will make they'll make it from scratch, and so they'll show all the pieces. So you put it up on that site. The Danish might change their mind once they see how many votes.
I don't really want to lead that charge. Like I'm not like a really pro-gun
No,
person.
no.
I want Nerf guns only.
Universal you. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You could just fire a little Lego man would be cool, actually.
I thought like they'd fire Lego pieces, but then I realized that would really hurt to get hit with little jagged, like the corner of a Lego piece.
If you could trade one of your talents for a superpower, what would it be?
I'm upgrading a talent or I'm sacrificing one.
You are trading. You have to swap it for something else.
Okay, I would trade my sense of direction because it is horrible. But I'm still going to call it a talent. I think that being able to navigate anywhere at any time in any capacity is somewhat of a talent. It's like a 1 out of 100, but it exists. That's what I will give away.
That's an amazing argument for
Yeah.
you just convinced me. He's talented at direction, but he also sucks at it. But it's a
I'm
talent.
technically
Wow.
talented. The best
It's-
kind of
Yeah,
talented.
technically correct. The best kind of being
Terribly
correct.
talented.
Yeah, so I would trade that away. And I think what superpower do I want? I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, but then I always still hesitate to answer. I think it would be teleporting myself because all the other superpowers they're too OP, and I think I would actually lose the enjoyment of life. But I don't think I would ever miss traveling.
Okay,
So-
wait. You want to give up your sense of direction?
So I could just be there. Like I'm
So
sure
you
I'm up.
teleport.
Yeah, I just
But
want
if
to.
you
But
don't-
how are you going to
how
get there?
How do you know where you need to go if you don't have your sense of direction?
I'm just gonna say I want to be. This is a superpower. It's all included.
Okay.
I want to be able to just say I'm at Chris's house right now, and then boom, I'm there.
All right, that's
I don't want to
really
have
powerful.
to navigate in any capacity. I just want to be there.
So you just
and
say
I'd
the
like
place
to be able
where
to.
you're there.
Yeah, and I want it to be like a cartoon where whoever I'm holding hands with comes with me, because otherwise it's a waste. I get to Greece and then I have to wait 20 hours for my wife to fly there. Like I need to be
That's
able
going
to
to be a real bad conversation.
Right, exactly. Like, all right, maybe I'll see you there. Like, I'm gonna end up having to travel to the airport anyway if I can't bring her. So, I need to be able to hold people and then just be like, all right, we're all going to this place. It would be super valuable, but not like to the point where a government is gonna like kidnap me. Like I feel like you could be so OP that it could really hinder your life, where you could be like assassinated or like captured for study. I don't need any of that. I just want to quietly get to hang out with my friends who live all over the country, and that'd be really cool.
What a great segue into our next and final section, rapid fire. Quick, sometimes silly questions that may or may not be on the topic and that you may or may not answer correctly. Totally subjective. So the first one I want to ask you is, who is your top pick from a team with green in their team color?
Ooh, I gotta think about that. I guess I would go with Jalen Hurts, the Eagles quarterback. I think he's just gonna have another fantastic season.
There's a bird for you. There's
Another bird. Yeah, I had to.
He's my backup quarterback.
It was a two-part question. The bird
Lamar.
part was implied, and then the green.
What is your favorite nonfiction book?
I love the book, The Art of Thinking Clearly. It's by Rolf Dobelli, and it's a bunch of like micro chapters. They're like 2 or 3 pages long, and they just rapid fire attack a bunch of cognitive biases that most people have. And it just blew my mind. I try to read it every couple of years. I buy it for people all the time as a gift. I just think it's such a fascinating read. And even people who aren't big readers can get through it because it's like, all right, I'm going to read a chapter every day. It takes 5 minutes. And then you can really like ruminate on what you read and think about it a lot. It's better if you do it that way instead of trying to blast through it in one sitting. So you can really think about each one and just be like, wow, that's really interesting that our brains are wired to work this way, but it would actually be better if we could steer them this way.
Very cool.
I love that kind of stuff. I love those quick little kind of tidbits. I mean, there was Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss.
And then there's another one that I heard about, which is 101 Essays. I think 101 Essays That'll Change Your Life or something like that. But it's the same kind of concept. Next rapid fire. Which is nerdier, football or foosball?
Fantasy football or foosball?
Still foosball. Love both. Both passionate about both. But yeah, I think foosball's nerdier.
Yeah.
Sure.
Fantasy football is pretty mainstream at this point. I don't think there's a lot of diehard foosball.
Nerddom is very mainstream, so I think it's mainstream because nerdiness is mainstream. That's my.
I like that. Yeah.
I will argue that point. I think it's. I don't know. Foosball's.
It's a big part of our brand.
I think foosball is more lame and nerd is cool now. So, anyway, zombie apocalypse weapon of choice.
Ooh, flamethrower. I think.
Ooh, you're gonna run out of juice.
Well, I don't have unlimited ammo. I mean, come on.
Zombie apocalypse, do you?
I don't know, man. I feel
full-blown
like
zombie
really
apocalypse.
dangerous. You're gonna burn yourself. You're
bullet with 2 guns. Me and my wife are just gonna go ahead and quit. We're gonna rage quit right away.
You're gonna fight some flaming zombies and then be done.
Well, the cool thing is usually those flames are gonna spread, so maybe you won't need more ammo.
And when you explode, you'll save everybody else in the party.
True.
Now, what is one of the weirdest events you've ever been to?
Weirdest events?
Could be like for your work or, because you were talking a lot about all the events that you've been to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was in France for the Cannes Film Festival, and I went to a modeling gala or something, and it was apparently a big deal gala, and I knew nothing about it, and just watching a modeling event, if you've never been to one and you really have no concept, is just really bizarre. It's just a weird experience, and not in a terrible way, just in wow, this is so different from anything else that I've ever been a part of, and probably won't attend many more. So it was just I was just really this is a very unique experience that I'm trying to take in and appreciate, but it's also kind of really not my cup of tea.
To be clear, they were modeling the clothing or the models?
Yeah, so it was runway modeling, doing clothing, and then there was a auction that would happen in between, and then Jason Derulo performed, which I loved. That was the highlight by far to me.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was it had a lot of interesting parts.
Nice. Well, not very rowdy, but still very important question. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars. I didn't ever get exposed to Star Trek until I was already old enough that I'd locked in Star Wars as my preference.
Very nice.
Yoda or Obi-Wan?
Big Yoda guy.
which of the movies would be your favorite?
I'm not in it enough. I'm gonna offend people. Like I'm like not deep
Perfect.
into it enough. Because
Controversial. It's hot. It's all good.
the fourth movie is actually the first one that they released, right? So
Phantom Menace.
I once said the first one's my favorite. And people were like, it's the fourth one. And I was like, I don't even know if that's right or wrong. So now I usually try not to say it. But I liked the first one that came out that's like fourth in the sequence.
Right. Star Wars.
Yeah.
Straight
But
Star
because that was
Wars.
the first one I saw. I watched it with my dad and my brother, and I just thought it was really cool. And so, yeah, that one's just, it's a nostalgia choice.
Now,
A New
to be
Hope.
clear, yeah, New Hope. Okay, so Luke Skywalker, not Anakin Skywalker.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Did you see? Well, okay, let's not preface it, but let's just say, best Spider-Man actor, in your opinion.
Tobey Maguire.
Boom.
What the?
I don't even think it's close. I don't even know how it's on
It's
your
total-
question sheet.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you.
This must have been something the two of you planned.
This was not set up
This
at
was not
all.
planned at all. No,
I
I
don't
just think
believe
it's
you. Fake
easily
news.
Toby.
Fake news.
All right. What? I'm going to keep going with the food questions. What is the best munchie or snack food?
Ooh, cookies, warm cookies. Or I was just exposed to tiny pies, which might be better than cookies. There's a place in Austin called Pie
How tiny?
Bar. Like probably like the size of a cookie, but it just has some depth, so you can get more filling. And so, like they have like a chocolate chip cookie, but it's like this thick, and like when you scoop into it, it's so like gooey and warm because it's like a pie filling. So I actually think they've converted me. I just had that last night for the first time. So I think I've recently been converted to a tiny pie guy over cookies.
Wow,
Nice.
that sounds decadent.
Look it up if your area has them, because apparently this is a trend. A
I'm
couple
looking up
places.
Tiny Pies Vancouver right now.
What is a subscription that you just can't live without?
Spotify.
Yeah.
I've overcommitted myself to it. Like if I ever had to start over making my playlists, I would cry.
That's how they get you.
Right. They could charge anything now. Like there's nothing I could do. I guess they could charge so much that it would be worth hiring a virtual assistant to rebuild my playlists on another platform. So that's their only threat.
Yep.
Tupac or Biggie?
I'm really not educated enough on the topic. Like I would say Tupac because I know more of his stuff, but they were both before my time. Like I grew up and they were kind of already phasing out. And so then it was like Jay-Z, Kanye, that's who I grew up with. And I just never went back and listened to all that much. So I probably know 2 or 3 songs from each. Can't really have a true opinion.
Wrong answer.
Right, yeah, of course, wrong answer, yeah.
Safe answer. I approve of that. You definitely sound like that. Sounds like something you may have had to say in the past if someone asks a question about a sport or something. I'm honestly not educated enough on this matter to really comment. You know, it's a very good answer. I like it. I'm on
Thanks.
par with that.
Yeah, no, I try to
Make
just,
it right.
yeah, I try to. I was gonna say sometimes people like Chris will be upset about it, but I try to not just make up a fake answer. I wouldn't do well in politics because that's what they want you to do. They want you to just make up an answer when you don't know.
Such a
I
good
need a
lesson.
position on this.
That's such a
Right.
good lesson. Like I definitely, my personal life, I bullshit a lot, and people that know me well enough can tell, and they just shake their head after I say something. It's just like, crap. They could tell I was full of shit.
Yep.
Yeah, you see me shaking my head on these videos sometimes.
Last 3 books you've read.
Unfortunately, all of them were about golf. I've been reading about how to improve your golf swing. I think I mentioned this earlier on the show. I'm really someone who like learns by reading, and I'm really not nearly as much of a visual or auditory learner, to the extent that like reading about golf has actually helped me more than practicing. So like after I read a couple of books about putting, I actually just went out there and just was immediately a significantly better putter without like practicing it at all. I just found that so much of golf is mental, and so reading about it has been really helpful for me.
Wow, that's a superpower, dude. Like,
Thanks.
that's awesome.
So what's your favorite TV show?
You know, it changes. It used to be Monk. You know the show Monk? It's a detective show.
It's like about liars or something?
No, it's a guy with OCD who's like an amazing detective. Tony Shalhoub is the lead actor. He won the Tony Awards like every year. I think he's the reason like The Office could never win any awards because Monk always would win. So it was Monk in The Office for a while. Now I just kind of am like on a rotation of a bunch of different shows right now. I'd say the show I'm most looking forward to the next season coming out is Severance. Have you seen that? Mm-mm. It's the show where it's really interesting. They let you opt into a surgery where they separate your work life from your personal life. And whenever you're at work, you can't know or think about anything in your personal life. You don't even know who you are outside of work. And then when you're at home, you don't know what your job is. You don't know anything about work. And it's interesting how it all plays out. It's like this interesting concept of like they let people opt in. It's like, do you want to live two different lives? And both people seem happier than the original person, but they both are so curious about who their other half is. It's an interesting show, and they do it in a way that you're not like, it's not your favorite show necessarily when you're watching it, but it leaves you like really thinking about it a lot. And now my wife and I are constantly looking up like, when is season 2 coming out? And it's like not for so long, so we're just like,
Justin, this has been awesome, and thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow you, support you, and potentially get some picks from you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Justin Macmahan. I tweet about entrepreneurial stuff sometimes. I have a thread that's pinned on my account right now about all the things I learned from running a business for 8 years. Some of the things that we didn't touch on in the show you might find interesting. So if you just want to go read that, you don't even have to follow me or anything. You can just go read that. It's pinned on my Twitter account. If you are interested in getting fantasy football picks, you can get my full rankings and all my analysis for the season on reallygoodpicks.com. It's like $29 and you can get you can download my rankings. You can even upload them into sites that allow you to upload your own rankings. So one of the biggest advantages if you're trying to beat your fantasy league is most people are just going to use the default rankings on the platform. So if they're using ESPN, everyone will use the ESPN default rankings. So if you use my rankings instead, you're just going to be really unique. So everyone in your league is going to be reaching for the same players, and you're just going to get all these guys that they're not like necessarily thinking about because the default rankings don't have them in the certain order. So if you want to dominate your league, it might be worth $29 to you, even if you can't win all that much, just to crush your league mates and have the bragging rights. And if you're serious about it and you actually want to like bet on games and stuff, then you can subscribe for longer than 1 month. But yeah, I could see someone like Chris being like a 1 month user type of guy just to beat his friends.
100%. 100%. I was like, I am joining up, grabbing those. And
yeah, we have a lot of people that sign up in August and cancel after a month, and it's like totally fine. Just use it for whatever you want to use it for.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And as always, everybody, keep it nerdy.
Before you leave, we'd love your help in getting our show to reach more people and to grow. The easiest way is by subscribing to this YouTube channel, leaving a comment, like, all the above. Another really easy way that doesn't cost you a dime is to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review on our podcast there. Really helps. It's kind of crazy. You can also follow us and leave some stars on Spotify. I'm not exactly sure how that algorithm works, but it seems kind of like that would help. And then lastly, joining us on Patreon. Our board of nerdpreneurs there get a lot of great content, including the full interviews and a bunch of talking nerdy information. It's pretty fun. Pretty good content on there. You know, I'm a little biased, but Also, we got to give a shout out to our wonderful patrons, Kinchi, Aaron, Glenn Smythe, and Anthony Antonellis. You people are amazing, and we are so grateful that you are on this journey with us and that we're getting to help you with the additional content that only you get. Well, that's it for this episode. Everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day, and as always, keep it nerdy.